This is HBR News number 366. Taylor Lorenz is still garbage. Feminist woke mom loses her child, where we reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello everyone and welcome to Honey Badger Radio and happy August, which is Men's History Month, according to Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, but I'll take it. I think that it'd probably be a good thing if men had a history month. So it's Men's History Month, August. Welcome to the show, and I hope you guys are doing well this week, and that you're trying your best to essentially endure the constant bad news that seems to be cropping up. Take pleasure in the things in your life that bring you pleasure. I am your host, Brian Martinez, and I'm joined by, as always, my co-hosts, Mike J., Dr. Random Cam, and Hannah Wallen. We have a great show lined up for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comment section. On this week's HBR News show, we're going to be talking about a development, a recent story regarding a New York Times journalist, Taylor Lorenz, who actually I think that we have a lot of history with. So I know that she's been coming up in the news, more recently, but I think that we were dealing with Taylor Lorenz for years. And so, we're well aware of her and her kind of shenanigans. She apparently we'll get into it. I don't want to give anything away. So then we have some unfortunate side effects of certain puberty blockers that appear to be affecting children looking to have their gender affirmed. A university's newest program entitled the Angry White Male Studies, because that's just what we need right now, and more. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. And someone sent me this on my Facebook. I haven't read it yet. I cringe at the possibility of having to read it, but I am going to do it for the after show, or for today's patron show. It is from Mashable.com, and it's really long, considering how sort of sophomoric the subject matter is. But the title is Harley Quinn, which I think is a reference to a show, an animated series that's for adults. That's what it is. And why we all lose when superheroes can't eat pussy. That's the argument. Superheroes should be engaging in sexual behavior because I'm not horny on Maine by Jess Joho. And I that's a funny name. Or Ho-Ho if you're Latino. Jess Ho-Ho. So we're going to be reading this article where she essentially, I guess, makes the argument that these cartoons should have fucking in them because that's what she thinks. And so, we'll take a look at that in the patron show. If you guys want to join us in the patron show, you have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and starting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into the Discord, where you'll be able to essentially watch all of the additional content, all of the patron shows. Allison occasionally puts up drafts or videos that she's working on to get feedback. And there's also a lot of community things going on too. So please consider going to feedthebadger.com, setting up a monthly subscription. It really helps us out. And if I'm not incorrect, I think that the more memberships we have, the less we need to worry about doing fundraisers every month so that people like Hannah and myself can continue to do this work. Because otherwise I got to find a regular job, which I'm more than willing to do. But yeah, it's just sort of unsustainable if there's a constant struggle to stay afloat. So, all right. Anyway, and in addition, if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we've been yeeted from the internet because YouTube finally did us in, then please go to badgerfeed.com so that you can see where all of our content lives. That's badgerfeed.com. All right. So now we can get into today's stories, and we're going to start with Taylor Lorenz. So, Mike J, if you would do the honors.
Well, certainly, Brian. So, in her latest self-inflicted own, Washington Post reporter and well-known drama llama, Taylor Lorenz, the Taylor Lorenz of doxing libs of TikTok fame, the same Taylor Lorenz that would then go on to stalk the family members of libs of TikTok, that Taylor Lorenz claims to be the victim of harassment while at a protest.
So then I just want to issue a quick correction. I thought she worked for the New York Times. It's the Washington Post. I apologize. They're both crap. They're basically the same, but my bad. Washington Post. Although she may have written for the New York Times before too. But go on.
So, on the 23rd of July, Lorenz posted a digital flyer in support of an upcoming protest at Instagram's headquarters. So, on the 23rd of July, Lorenz posted... Can you hear me, Brian?
Okay, yeah. No, that's okay. Go ahead. I apologize. That's Rumble shenanigans. It was muted. For some reason, it unmuted itself. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to start fresh there. On the 23rd of July, Lorenz posted a digital flyer in support of an upcoming protest at Instagram's headquarters in San Francisco, California. She also noted that she would be at the aforementioned protest. But it wasn't long until Lorenz would dramatically tweet the following. Hannah, you do such a
oh my gosh. Okay. Give me just a second because I've been trying to open this.
Is the Patreon thing giving you trouble?
The desktop computer's giving me trouble. Let me try my.
Hold on, you got Discord open?
I don't even know what I did to it. Give me a second.
You got Discord open? I'll give you a screenshot.
He can give you a screenshot. Put it in Discord.
It's I just have to click on the link. I just have to go to the correct chat.
It's the live show chat.
It's the bolded text.
Yeah, it's the bold text.
Oh, God. Well, I forgot. I can't post where I am anymore or cover things live. Nothing has been more stressful than having men obsessively stalk me on the internet and show up to confront me in places in person. It's terrifying and invasive. Women journalists should not have to deal with this.
She would quickly follow this up with another tweet stating,
"Just because you follow me does not mean you know me. Leave me the fuck alone."
I'm sorry. As notable as her claims were, Lorenz would go on to not provide any evidence or witnesses to the alleged confrontation or stalking. Though soon afterward, a man described as being autistic and a minority describes his interaction with Lorenz. The man in the video describes his reason for attending the protest, which is to meet the organizers of said protest, which, and this is notable, did not include Lorenz. Standing a good 25 feet or so away from Lorenz, he had no intention to speak with her until she approached him. Lorenz asked his name and then asked him to leave the protest. According to the man, he simply left after the exchange without another word. Now, it should be noted that the man in the video does not have any evidence of the exchange occurring either. Now, that's the sort of he said, she said out of the way. There is another slightly deeper layer to the story, but as with the lion's share of this, none of it can be verified. Mm-hmm. This video, by the way, of this man who I don't even think his name's out there, and I didn't want to go looking in case that was for a reason. But it comes from a Twitter account, Ariadna Jacob.
Yeah.
And she says that this man formerly ran a fan page for Lorenz where she he retweeted everything she posted. And at first she liked the attention, but then she realized, oh no, I can't control this account. People might be saying things on there that I haven't approved. So she basically DM'd him in a very not nice way, demanded he stop reposting her stuff, and accused him of being invasive and noting that she can only assume he wants to harm her. And if these timestamps of these interactions are true, this is something that happened as of last November.
So, as far as we know, according to the albeit rather believable hearsay, Taylor Lorenz stalked somebody and then claimed he was stalking her. Now, that sounds like shocking behavior, but is anybody shocked? Anybody who's familiar with Taylor Lorenz and her usual antics, as you all are. When it comes to people who do this, we often find ourselves asking the question, to what degree are they doing it on purpose? Does Taylor Lorenz know she's lying and that she's projecting every transgression she makes onto the people onto whom she's inflicting them? Or is she the kind of pathological liar who actually believes their own lies? A lot of them do that. They sort of climb inside the lie. They convince themselves that it's the truth, and from that moment on, they actually forget what really happened. They deny reality and substitute their own. Most of the time, I'm convinced it's the latter. I think it's actually quite rare for people to deliberately lie that often, because it will weigh heavily on whatever semblance of a conscience you have. And you can't just undo your conscience. You can't just switch it off. But if you get so accustomed to twisting the truth like that, then your conscience has to find a way to justify what you're doing. And so it all happens subconsciously in a split second before your conscious mind even knows what's happened. You did a deplorable thing, so your brain goes, I don't do deplorable things, therefore the deplorable thing I identified must be the thing that this other person did. End subroutine, go to davo.exe. Everything is easier when you have your conscience intact, so the conscience will find a way to remain intact. That's how a great deal of mental illness has come about, through a crisis of conscience that's unresolved or indeed resolved into a sort of an alternate reality. But Taylor Lorenz is the kind of person who makes me think, no, I think she might be the former. I think she might be one of the rare people who knows she's lying. She knows she's framing her opponents with all the bullshit she does. And she never has a crisis of conscience because she's never had a conscience in the first place. She's what someone more qualified than me might refer to as a sociopath. She happens to be extremely lucky to have found a job where she gets paid to be a sociopath. Again, most of these legacy media journalists are not sociopaths. They just found themselves lying for a living and they twisted their conscience into a pretzel to sort of deal with it. But some of them were born to be legacy media journalists. Or perhaps they've only been that way since childhood because the silver spoon has never been removed. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. And if I was, I wouldn't want to study Taylor Lorenz within 50 feet of the padded cell she belongs in. It's the kind of case study that leaves you dribbling in a rocking chair, eating your own feces. And that's not how I saw my future.
So you got to remember, this is a woman who does this professionally. She goes out and stalks people and harasses them and victim signals over either their response or even just absolutely nothing. Like, they don't actually have to do anything back to her, or even, say, hey, please stop that, for her to victim signal over it and pretend that, somebody has done something to her in retaliation for her atrocious behavior, which is perfectly acceptable behavior. And this is just one more thing. It's just the meat of this story is that this entitled woman stalked an intellectually disabled man, followed him to an event that he was supposed to be at, that she was not, and kicked him out. She wasn't a part of the event, he was, and kicked him out. Be like somebody coming to one of our events and finding somebody with a disability and kicking them out. It was absolute bullshit. It's abuse, and hardly anybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
But us, and the individual that wrote about it. But it doesn't seem to have anybody's attention. And it might be because this time she did it to a man, because people certainly paid attention when she docked Libs of TikTok, who is a woman. Now, granted, she went to her house, but telling somebody they can't go to events that they are a part of, that they're involved with, because you want to be there even though you're not involved, I think it's just as bad as going to somebody's house, because you're now, now you don't just have one location that you have to worry about this stalker showing up at. It's everywhere. The guy can't go anywhere. Taylor Lorenz might be there. And it's very much the same thing that some women who take out restraining orders, women that take out false restraining orders against their ex-husbands to harass them, or against their ex-boyfriends to harass them. I've seen them do this. The guy that was the victim in the 7 Years in Hell story, his ex did this, where she took out a restraining order, and he wasn't allowed to be within, it was a temporary emergency restraining order, but he wasn't allowed to be within 500 feet of her. And then she went to all of his favorite places, so he couldn't go there. And it was all places that she never liked going prior. But now that she had a restraining order that would keep him from going there, she was there all the time. And he couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't leave his house. So, this is like Doc said, it's sociopathic behavior, but it's also narcissistic behavior. This made the situation all about her. And, the best thing to do in a situation like this is just start documenting. That guy really should get a restraining order against her, because you never know. She may do this to him again.
Yeah. I believe that, and just to add to what everyone else is saying, I do believe that there are people who lie about an incident. They lie about the facts of a specific incident or a specific event, but what they convince themselves they're doing is telling the truth about some broader point or some societal criticism. So consider, for example, Jussie Smollett, which is a really good example. He concocted the entire hoax. He made it all up, right? But what he thought he was, even though it was a lie, and it was clearly a lie that he told out of some self-interest for his career, because it boosted his profile, and suddenly everyone knew the name of this guy who was like a TV actor on a show that not a lot of people watched, or at least not like a large number. So it was all good for his career in the short term and everything. But I believe that many of these people, they tell a lie, and they know it's a lie, and they're okay with telling a lie, because what they think they're actually doing is telling some greater truth. So Jussie Smollett did this, and then he said, something to the effect of, this is something that happens to gay black men, all over the country, and I'm just putting a spotlight on it. Even though obviously what he did is not true, it didn't happen. But they do believe that, like feminists will do this kind of, demonstrative, performative activism, where they will say, this guy harassed me sexually. And of course, like, the definition of sexual harassment now is like basically a man looking at a woman for too long, even if she's just walking through his field of vision. But then use that to try, and it could be completely untrue, and they completely know that, but they'll use it in a way that tricks people into thinking that they're talking about something that does happen, even if it didn't happen in this specific occurrence. And it's to get people to think, well, that didn't happen, but that does happen somewhere in the world, right? And of course, that's what I think, that there is like a kind of liar that thinks that their lies are actually telling the truth. And I think that that could fall into the sociopath category for sure. But I just wanted to I was just thinking about that too, because I have a younger brother. He's a pathological liar. And I know the reason for this is that when he was really little, if he did something bad, he would lie to our mother so that she wouldn't hit him because he did something bad. And then he would continue to repeat the lie to the point where he lies to himself, and he convinces himself that that's the truth now. And that just, like if he had to take a lie detector test, he'd be deadpan saying a lie and it wouldn't bother him because he tricked himself into believing it as true. And there are people who do that, but I think that's more of a product of a dysfunction and not necessarily or a fear response in his case, as opposed to like what I was describing before, like a Jussie Smollett or an Amber Heard, where they lie to your face about something they experience, and then they make it seem as though it's a systematic or society-wide problem, and that means that even if you prove them wrong on the personal, then they still have the broader narrative. And I think that's what Taylor Lorenz might be using. She might even genuinely believe this guy was harassing her because, she's like not well and a bit paranoid. And this guy, he was like an Indian guy, right? Mike, I think he was. He was like an Indian guy and an autist, or at least that's what people are saying. But we don't even know if any of this is true because it's all hearsay at this stage. But it is interesting that Taylor Lorenz made this into the story that it is. This kind of stuff would normally not have been a story, but it is now because there are implications, that there are things that people like Lorenz advocate for, which is essentially, that journalists get special privileges. That she's obviously a feminist, so she believes that women should get them and that they should be enshrined in law and that they should be enforced. So like this is not nothing, but I think that it is definitely worth talking about. So those are my thoughts on that. All right, should we move on? Are you guys there? It's like really quiet. Hello? Uh-oh. I think my Discord crashed. Hold on, guys. I gotta restart it. Hold on. All right, I'm back, guys. I apologize. Just waiting on Discord to open up. Damn it. Sorry, dudes. All right, well, let me close Zoom. I don't know why that's open. And let me close Discord. And then I'm going to reopen it. Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened, but Discord seems to have frozen. So, it's starting back up. Super annoying. What was the last thing you heard me say? I think I was basically done, and then that's when it happened. So, I've been watching you guys off and on since 2013, and you guys are still cursed with audio problems. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's audio problems. I think it's like problems with the platforms we're using. And I don't know why. Maybe I'm doing too much. Maybe my computer can't handle it. All right, I'm back.
Hello.
Yay!
I'm sorry. I had to like restart Discord. It just froze. But we're still live, so I don't know what that was. I apologize. But it wasn't me. All right, so let me, so basically the last thing I said really briefly was, well, I don't even remember. It doesn't matter because I did get to finish it, but does anyone want to say anything else about this story?
Just fuck Taylor Lorenz. Not in
Yeah.
a good way.
Yeah.
Can confirm.
Yeah, I think that's good enough.
It's just go away for a bit, Miss Lorenz.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Reevaluate some things in your life.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So we're going to leave it at that. Let us know what you guys think about this in the comments. Before I move on to the next story, though, I did get 3 super chats, so I'm going to read through those really quick. Iggy Thunders gives us $10. This was right when we were starting. And says, have you watched Aiden Paladin's 2-part series on lefty pedo advocacy? Grooming has been a facet of socialist utopian philosophy as far back as Charles Fourier. This new push isn't new. Yes, I am aware of it. I didn't watch Aiden's videos, but I've been watching and reading up on people like Gail Rubin and Fourier and Paolo Fieri, these guys that were involved with education, and they're promoting this thing called social emotional learning, or SEL. And yes, this stuff goes way back because, I mean, you could even say that it goes back to Mary Wollstonecraft and her daughter, Mary Shelley, because there was a desire. Essentially, the way that they saw it is, in order for us to truly achieve equality, everyone would have to be like absolutely liberated, and then that would include sexual liberation, and that would include the sexual liberation of children. And so, yes,
I love how they call taking advantage of people liberation.
Yeah,
Like, it's so feminists make no sense, and the left makes no sense on stuff like this. They'll say if you're drunk, you can't consent. Why? Because your cognitive abilities are impaired. You're not competent at that point to appraise your actions, right? But then they'll turn around and they'll support the idea that someone whose cognitive abilities are so undeveloped, whose ability to appraise the reality around them is so undeveloped, that they will believe you when you tell them a fat man in a red suit comes down through the chimney and gives them presents every year, and a fairy comes in through their window at night and steals their teeth out from under their pillow after they fall out, and they won't be scared of that. Right? And a bunny delivers candy and eggs to your house every year. Not scary at all, not weird if you're 5, because you don't understand why it would be weird. You don't understand what makes that impossible, right? And yet, they're competent to consent to an interaction that, if it goes wrong for them, could make them suicidal, because that does happen, and your brain chemistry is part of it. I mean, this is why I find it hard to take anything seriously when these people say it. But I would be pleased as punch if somebody would send me a link to that
to the Aiden Paladin's
work on this.
Yeah,
because I would like to hear what she has to say about it, because she does talk about that brain chemistry, and actually she probably has some things to say about that as well. And this is something that I've been watching on the left for quite a long time, years actually before I was involved online with the men's rights movement. I was watching people do this advocacy that kids can consent to something that they can't possibly understand.
Yeah. And I mean, like, this isn't like I said, this isn't new. People are just now like waking up to it because it's in their schools and all of that. But yeah, it's not new. This has been planned for a very, very long time. It's been pursued for a very long time. So yeah, not at all surprising, but thank you, Iggy Thunders, for that. Meredith G gives us $5 and says, Lorenz did work for the New York Times, and that didn't end well, given how she bashed the New York Times on her way out of the door. Well, probably because she doesn't think they're progressive enough or something, right? Not that the Washington Post is that much different, because I don't think it is, but then Iggy Thunders gives us another $10 and says, sorry for the bombshell message, and right out of the gate, please by all means take my money. No, it's okay. It's not like I said. It's not like it hasn't been things that we've been thinking about. And I do think that it's important that we discuss it. Like I said, look up Gail Rubin. She's a feminist, a woman, academic, wrote some books. Really creepy. Just really, really creepy. Okay? Ken Chic Quotes gives us 40 Indian pesos, rupees, gems, yen, I don't know, and says Karen is the manager we need, but not we deserve. All right. Well, thank you for that. And let me just check the super chows as well, because I know that those get sent in, and I have an issue not looking at them right away. So let me take a look at those now, and then we'll move on to the next story. Super chow. There we go. Real Not Fake News gives us $5 and says, I'm here to support HBR News, not like the fake news from WAPO. Well, thank you for that. We try our best. The problem is that we're working with the news to try and unpack the news to give you some useful information. So it's kind of hard because for all we know, like literally every story we've ever done was a lie. For all we know, we just, there's always a possibility. But I mean, I'm not quite on the everything is a psyop, stage of the red pilling yet myself. So I will try to report on things as they are. And even if we can't confirm every fact, there is likely something useful we can pull from it. Like, you might pull from a fairy tale that has a good lesson or it's a cautionary message or something. So, all right. But anyway, thank you for all of your super chats and donations. And now we're going to move on to the next story. So, yeah, of course, this happened. We're going to be talking about not the vax. That's not what this is about. Because I know you see the image, we're going to be talking about puberty blockers. So, Mike J, if you could. Can you guys hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah, we're good. So, a puberty blocking drug known as, I'm going to try to get this in one go, gonadotropin releasing hormone, usually referred to as GnRH, has received a warning from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Officials noted severe clinical issues in 6 young girls between the ages of 5 and 12 being treated with the hormone. The FDA reports, quote, 5 girls were undergoing treatment for central precocious puberty, which means early puberty, and 1 for transgender care. The onset of pseudotumor cerebri symptoms ranged from 3 to 240 days after GnRH agonist initiation. End quote. Each girl suffered from what's known as pseudotumor cerebri, in which symptoms synonymous with a brain tumor manifest in the subject. These symptoms include vomiting, headaches, visual disturbances, increased blood pressure, and brain swelling. A spokesperson for the FDA stated, quote, although the mechanism by which GnRH agonists may lead to a development of pseudotumor cerebri has not been elucidated, the patients with CPP, that's again child precocious puberty or early puberty, may have a higher baseline risk of developing pseudotumor cerebri compared with children without CPP. This potential serious risk associated with GnRH agonists justifies inclusion in product labeling. End quote.
We are allowed to talk about this on YouTube, right?
I think
Hope so.
This kind of injection. Yeah.
So, something that people should understand about this, right? The symptoms that were described here, I can attest to how they feel because I've experienced brain swelling. At the age of 12, I was infected with a virus from a mosquito bite. They think it was West Nile, but for whatever reason, it kicked in really, really hard and really, really fast, and it almost killed me. And what these girls went through was absolute torture. Like, I can't overemphasize that. I get migraines. Like, I get really bad migraines. I get the kind of migraines that interfere with your vision. And prior to having encephalitis, I noticed them. Now I don't, because it doesn't compare. The pain from those migraines doesn't compare to the pain from encephalitis. If somebody had walked up to me with a power drill and said, I can just drill a hole in your head and we'll get rid of some of that pressure and you'll feel better, I'd have been grabbing the drill and holding it to my own head. I felt better after a spinal tap. Right? Like it was that bad. So what these girls were going through, and every symptom that's described there is very familiar. It makes you throw up. It causes an immense amount of head pain. It causes your vision to distort, and you can have hallucinations from it. Your blood pressure goes up, and what they don't tell you here is that makes your joints hurt really bad. And this is something that is happening to little girls. Now, CPP, I had a friend when I was a kid that had that, and it is in and of itself really rough on the kid. Like to be, like 8 years old and start having a period and cramps and all that stuff when all the other girls aren't going to have that for a couple of years, and the girls pick on her for developing breasts, and actually other girls called her a slut for developing breasts because like she had control over that or something, right? So I understand why they want to treat it, but holy shit, should they ever be precautious? Take precautions about this and be very careful who they dose this with. And it should certainly not be handed out to 5 to 12-year-olds like candy because they think they might be the opposite sex. And not take time to be sure of that. Because if it can do this to anybody that takes it. They might be more predisposed if they have this one issue, but that doesn't mean it can't happen to the others, because one of the girls in this study or in this note was not a CPP patient. She was a transitioning patient. Yeah. And that tells you it can happen to them too. So if your kid is going through something like that, the best thing to do is wait until they're a little older so that they don't have to go through this. And I went through it for less than 6 weeks. 240 days? Like, that's insane. If somebody went through that for 240 days, they would be suicidal.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're still allowed to talk about these things in public without sort of contradicting any doctrines of the WHO that will later get redacted to reflect the true things we're currently saying. I hope in due course we can get to extend that courtesy to anything else that might be giving children strokes and heart failures and hepatitis. We live in hope, if we so choose to. We live in hope that at some point future generations will look back on these man-made horrors beyond our comprehension and see them for what they are. But I get the harrowing feeling that in the future, the population will have considerably shrunk in number, but the government will have only grown in power and influence. And, a smaller population is easier to control. You might say it's principally the culturally suicidal woke people who are yeeting themselves from the gene pool like this, but it's not. They're yeeting their own children from the gene pool. Children who might otherwise have grown up and rebelled against all the stupid shit their parents believe. That's often how these things work. That's how bad habits skip generations. In the same way, smokers tend to raise non-smokers and non-smokers tend to raise smokers. It's a bug and a feature. And hopefully it all eventually levels out into whatever is the healthiest option that's most conducive to actually maintaining repopulation. But shit like this isn't even giving us a chance. Children have that natural mechanism against indoctrination, but they don't have a mechanism against chemical warfare, against these, frankly, bioweapons that their parents are pumping into them before their bones are even fused. They might grow up hating and resenting their parents and the teachers and doctors who coerced them into this insane experiment, but it'll be too late. They won't even have the option of raising their own children to think for themselves because they'll be irreversibly infertile, if not dead already. Mm-hmm. Plus, the free-thinking people with enough common sense to have had children who were allowed to think for themselves will be living under a giant futuristic government machine that will arrest them for wrongthink and confiscate their children and raise them in this very program that swells their brains, fucks up their vision, and rips their genitals inside out. Future generations won't be able to look back on these mistakes and learn from them. They will be forbidden from doing so on pain of death, at least in this nightmare vision of the coming dystopia that I keep insisting on illustrating for everyone. You know me. I give you pills so black no light can escape the surface. It's to motivate you. It's to motivate you to fucking do something about it, just in case it isn't too late.
You know, this will be future sensible society's example of child sacrifice in the 21st century, because that's what it is.
Yeah, and sorry about the background noise. I guess there's a garbage truck outside. So, yeah, I guess let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. I'd like to hear your thoughts, and I'm gonna read your super chats and then move on to the next story. So, kind of blowing through them here a bit. Can Sheik Quotes gives us another 40 Indian rupees and says, do daily hormone dose for trans damage liver and kidney? I think what he's trying to say is, do daily hormone doses for trans people damage their livers or kidneys? Probably. I don't know. If you mess with hormones, you can get like a bunch of side effects. And I think that a lot of these things are just being used like they're basically not only the only way you can give someone gender affirming care, as they call it, but that you can do so like safely. They just it's like the same kind of mentality that says, oh, you're not feeling well, or you're sad today, pop these pills and you'll feel fine. And people presume that these things work, you know, like a Band-Aid or like an ibuprofen or something. And I think that that's what is going on with things like puberty blockers and these other hormonal injections. And there's going to be effects, and there's probably going to be effects that people like won't see right away. Like they may come later on down the line, you know, like certain other injections that people are getting without considering or looking at what the potential consequences or side effects might be, just saying a random example. And so, yeah, I think that it probably does damage the liver and kidney.
So what you got to understand about drugs is this: everything that you put through your digestive system and you make your body process that isn't food makes your kidneys and your liver work. And it's overworking them and subjecting them to chemicals that are hard for them to process that does that damage. There's some suggestion that if someone has their hormones out of balance and you give them hormone replacement therapy, it can protect some of their organs. But that would then also suggest that if you deliberately throw their hormones out of balance, you're going to damage their kidneys. So it's something that, like, beer damages your kidneys if you overuse it. Anything that you any chemical that you put in your body can damage your kidneys if you overuse it. And then people wonder why we have such an epidemic of kidney failure in the United States when we have the most prolific drug culture. Like, people take drugs for everything. And then they take drugs for the side effect of the drugs that they're taking. So yeah, like even things that can protect your kidneys in moderate amounts can damage them if you overuse them or use them when you don't need them.
Yeah. I mean, almonds can damage your kidneys. All right. So anyway, let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. Thank you, Kanishk, for the donations. And now we're going to move on to the next story, which this is related to the one we just covered. You guys may have heard about this. A Chicago mother lost the custody of her child after not affirming the child's transgender identity. Now, this kind of stuff has happened in the United States before. You guys might remember, I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a father who's currently fighting for custody of his son, who his ex-wife, who is a gender ideologue, one of these trans intersectional feminist types, is raising her son as though he is a girl. And I think part of it has to do with to spite the father.
It's almost always despite the father. It's almost always the mother doing this and the father objecting. This is a weird gender swap of that. I'll get back onto that when you finish the article.
Yes. Okay, so Jeanette Cooper, a lifelong educator with progressive politics, so a full-on feminist, progressive educator, right? Went through a divorce in 2015 and won custody of her only child 6 days and 7 nights a week, so she got custody most of the time. But in 2019, after a regular custodial visit to her father's home, Cooper's daughter, then 12, refused to come home. She insisted that she was trans and felt unsafe around her mother. Cooper claims that her daughter had never before exhibited any signs of gender dysphoria. After a 7-month-long investigation, court proceedings, and therapy sessions in Cook County, Illinois, Cooper lost her visitation rights. The only way Cooper is allowed to communicate with her daughter now is by U.S. mail, because she insists her daughter is a girl. Cooper says the following, quote, "People who are imprisoned have more communication with their child than I do. That's wrong." She continues, "After that report came out, I thought surely this is going to resolve itself. Clearly there is no finding of abuse or neglect. But the thing that I clearly am not complying with is this concept that good parenting means that you affirm a child's claim that there is something wrong with their body. I'm not willing to do that. I don't think that's good parenting." End quote. Sounds like transphobia bigotry to me, fake feminist. Cooper voluntarily entered into a new parenting agreement to avoid a prolonged hearing last year. Her daughter is to remain in the father's custody with no visitation rights without a court order unless her ex-husband agrees. After consulting with a therapist and attending 3 support group sessions for parents or guardians of transgender identifying children, the agreement allows Cooper to petition the court to see her daughter again. She attended those sessions last fall, the soonest she could enroll. But the specified therapist has no openings because her wait list is full. Cooper has missed her daughter's 13th, 14th, and 15th birthdays.
So, this is what a father has to do to get custody of his children for more than, 1 day and 0 nights per week? I'm certainly not in the mood to defend this particular father if he's doing it by enabling his daughter's learned gender dysphoria, as it would seem. He found a loophole in the system, but it's not a loophole that I can get behind. Unless, and here's where you get the M. Night Shyamalan twist in the story, unless it's all an elaborate hoax and the daughter is in on it. Maybe she's not having gender identity issues at all. She just wants to see her dad for more than 9 hours a week, and this is the only way she can do it. A 13-year-old can be just about savvy enough to understand what's going on there. They're usually highly immature in many ways, but they're smart enough to pull off an elaborate deception to get what they want. And if what they want is something they deserve, such as a meaningful relationship with their father, maybe it's the right thing to do. It's certainly a sorry state of affairs that children can't be with their fathers purely by virtue of wanting to, and that they need to hustle their way into this woke loophole, but that's the world we live in. Maybe not for long, though. Society always finds a way to fix the problems of women, especially mothers, who aren't getting their way. I wouldn't be surprised if the family courts in question and the family courts across the Western world adjusted their fine print to make sure that any child going through a gender transition should be left in the custody of their mother by default for the good of the child, and so on and so forth, thereby preventing fathers from ever again pulling off this kind of deception. Mothers, of course, would never do such a thing. That was obviously sarcasm. They don't need to do that sort of thing since they get custody by default anyway, but they still do it. Not because they have to, but because they can. You would be surprised how many problems in modern society stem from the things women do just because they can. Well, you guys wouldn't be surprised. You listen to Honey Badger Radio. But everyone else still thinks it's all men's fault. And that's why it keeps getting worse.
You know, I have to wonder, a lifelong educator with progressive politics, what kind of man did she choose to marry? Did she choose to marry, you know, some alpha dog out there with, you know, a tendency to stand up for himself and, you know, go out and maybe buy his own defense system, a couple of guns, you know, to keep around the house, and, you know, maybe voted for Trump and that, or did she choose to marry a soy boy male feminist that she thought would do everything that she told him to do? And I have a tendency to think maybe the latter. I have a tendency to think that this is probably a divorce between a rad fem and a male feminist soy boy, and he probably went the route of believing everything the G Mafia said, and the moment his daughter exhibited any combination of tomboy tendencies and maybe signs of autism, he went, "Trans! You're trans!" and that was it. Or worse, her school did it, and he went, "Oh, okay, that sounds right." Because a lot of people do that, and in particular, a lot of the woke end of feminists, as opposed to the rad fem end of feminists, who are just hateful, angry people. Whereas this mother, if she is more on the rad fem end, would probably be what you would call a TERF, and so that would be the conflict right there. He's probably telling the kid, "Yes, you're right about everything. Whatever you say, I'm going to go along with it," because he's supposed to do that under his ideology. And when she hits her 20s, if she decides to detransition, it's going to be hell for both of them. And then the mother is going to use that, because if she's a rad fem, like I said, she's a hateful, angry person, and she may very well use it to keep the dad out of the daughter's life forever after that.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Mike on this. I thought the same thing. I wondered if the daughter and the dad, when they were spending time together, if she wasn't like, "Oh, I wish I could, you know, hang out with you all the time." I think it's entirely plausible that she essentially used her mother's own belief system against her. I'd be curious, though. One thing I do find interesting about this is that she considers herself a progressive and everything, but she cannot accept, by her own account, that her daughter could possibly want to transition or want to live as a boy. And I'd be curious about is, what would she think about any other child that's not her child that's essentially talking about the same experience? Like, if it's someone in her classroom that's like, "I think I'm non-binary," or "I think I'm a girl and I'm actually born a boy," or whatever, would she say, "There's no way that's true," or, you know, "Let's not like get ahead of ourselves," or anything like that? Would she advocate any of that, or would she say, "Oh, well, that's all right"? Like, I'm wondering, is this just really hard for her because she's holding her kids to a standard that she won't hold any other kids? Because
also known as "not my kid" syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like, what I've noticed with there are definitely moms, and it's not always moms, but it's mostly moms, who try to affirm the gender of their child specifically to get kudos, love bombs, and attention online, in public, whatever, right? That definitely happens. But how many people whose job it is to essentially, pump the heads of kids with their progressive views are okay with that as long as it's not their kids? Because the anyone with two brain cells to rub together could see that if you do that with young people, as they get older, they're just going to take on more and more of it, and inevitably they end up hating and rebelling and disobeying and essentially standing in opposition to their own parents. And so a person who is a parent but is also progressive has to know that, and so they want to prevent that happening in their home, because they don't want it's sort of like how many feminists out there are telling women not to get married, not to have a family, not to be wives, not to be homemakers, and instead just go get that bag, right? Go get that bag, girl, go queen. But they themselves are married with children, and they basically work from home. Like, how many? Like, that happens all the time. It's like these feminists know, like, they want a lifestyle for other people that they're not willing to live under. So I wonder if that's not the case here. But I am, it's interesting because the other thing I was thinking is, what if the dad is a kind of like Giga Chad, pro male, working class, blue collar dude, and that's why, and then she, maybe she started off reasonable and then went crazy because she became a feminist teacher, and he was like, I can't handle this anymore. I mean, I don't know the guy, right? Because there's not a lot of info about the husband in this story. But what if that's the reason they are divorced, is because she's insufferable? And he was like, this isn't the woman I married. And then, of course, she knows the system, so she got initial custody of the child. So, I think obviously there's not a lot that we know because there's just not a lot out there. But I think these are interesting things to think about. So I will say, like, last word on this, I hope that this girl doesn't actually, is not actually under the belief that she's experiencing gender dysphoria, or that the father is actually more progressive than the mom and he's pushing it on her, which that doesn't add up to me, but it's possible. I hope none of that's happening, and that it's just an elaborate ruse so that she can, like, spend more time with her dad, which would be kind of cool in my opinion. So
I just gotta remind you guys, I have run into some pretty politically aggressive and socially aggressive male feminists. Some of them have actually been, like, they go so far as to behave in the ways that they accuse other men of behaving toward women because they are talking to a woman who disagrees with their ideology.
That's Twitter for you. It's a cesspool,
I'm talking everywhere, not just Twitter, not just social media, real life and everything. Like, you gotta remember, I used to be a witch. I had one of those in my old circle. He was really an aggressive person. He was aggressive in all of the ways a woman is aggressive. And this is something that can definitely happen. I'm not saying that's necessarily confirmed to be the case in this situation, but it is a very distinct possibility.
Yes.
Yes, Hothead Studios, I was a witch.
Yes. All right.
She got better, though.
She got better.
Be nice, or I'll turn you into a Newt. But not Newt Gingrich. That's already taken.
Now she's an MRA. That's even worse, right?
That's the worst thing you could be. All right, so let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story. And I don't see any new super chats or anything. Let me just take a quick peek over at Rumble. No, we're good. All right, so we're going to move on to the next story. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Now, speaking of teaching, we're going to be looking at a new studies department that's opening in the University of Kansas. So the University of Kansas is now offering angry white male studies this fall. I'm sure this is not at all going to be bad. The course will be part of the history department and taught by Christopher Forth. Forth is a professor of history and the dean's professor of humanities, serving in the departments of women, gender, and sexuality studies and American studies. Oh yeah. Oh my God, I can already see how cringe this is going to be. From the course description. This course charts the rise of the angry white male in America and Britain since the 1950s, exploring the deeper sources of this emotional state while evaluating recent manifestations of male anger. Employing interdisciplinary perspectives, this course examines how both dominant and subordinate masculinities are represented and experienced in cultures undergoing periods of rapid change connected to modernity, as well as to rights-based movements of women, people of color, homosexuals, and trans individuals. Forth's class drew significant criticism from Kansas Congressman Ron Estes in 2019. In an April 3rd, 2019 tweet, the congressman condemned the class, saying that, quote, instead of a course to unite people and empower women, KU has decided to offer a class that divides the student population and could pose a Title IX violation by creating a hostile campus environment based on gender, end quote. I mean,
you're going to study me? Hey, you're going to study me and my white male anger and raise a fist? And all that. How about Alex Jones? Fucking when Alex gets angry, it's a work of art. He'll eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. He's ready. Nah, it's gonna be fucking Kurt Cobain, isn't it? And John Lennon or some shit. It's gonna be a bunch of cucks and simps who were made angry by feminism, but who directed their anger at anything but feminism. Lest anyone is presented with an opinion that paints white men as human beings with vulnerabilities and legitimate problems caused by anything except other white men. Actually, they probably will touch upon the subject of Alex Jones. They'll just play the turning the frogs gay clip and then laugh and move on, neglecting to point out that he was kind of right about that and kind of right about a shitload of other things. It's only going to be about men who were wrong about something, or men who were right about something, but here's how they were actually wrong about everything. Come to think of it, the whole course is going to be about Trump, isn't it? It's going to be about Trump and all the times he was being hilarious and right about everything. That's what they mean by angry. A white man justifiably laughing his ass off at the inefficacy and corruption of the likes of Joe Biden, who is definitely not angry. As he stares into the camera, barking about Trump without moving or blinking. End of quote, repeat the line.
Or encounters someone who manages to say a word to him and he instantly goes after them like a guard dog.
Yeah, wants to wrestle under the bleachers in gym class or something. Challenges him to a push-up competition.
Hey, look here, fat. Look here, fat.
I like to take him out behind the gym and beat the hell out of him. Okay, that's not angry. This is really upsetting for me that this even exists, and that I mean, like, if you're someone who isn't certain that there is a huge problem with our education system, top to bottom, private, public, Catholic, none of it matters, right? Universities, community colleges, none of it. Charter schools, it's all possessed by this. And they someone can overtly and boldly say, I'm going to make a new class where we basically shit on white dudes for 10 weeks. And people will take this class and they will put themselves in debt to take this class, and they think that it's going to be in any way useful to them when they graduate. Oh, I took angry white male studies. And how many Like how is this person not just fired and sent packing? How is it that most of these university professors and teachers aren't just fired? Because they would regurgitate this shit. Like, I know this is a story about just this one class by this one dude, but this is actually the only class that is overtly telling you what it's about, when almost every other class is doing the exact same thing. They're just not calling it angry white male studies. They call it things like history and social studies and science and math and biology and gender studies, obviously. So it's not even just that. It's just they're so bold. They're just putting it out there. This is what we're teaching. What is the purpose of that? It's to create an environment of hostility from everyone that I guess doesn't qualify as a white male, but will also include self-hating white males, and then aim that aggression, that antipathy, that hatred towards white males. And not angry white males, because we've already established that, like, apparently men aren't allowed to have opinions on things, because if they do, then it gets interpreted as anger, even if it isn't anger. Although I do think that anger is justified. Like, I'm angry, but I'm not white, so I guess this isn't about me. But we know the truth. It is. The angry white male thing only works because enough people are willing to ignore it based on the fact that it has the word white in there, and they think, well, that's not about me. I'm a black male. I'm in the safe zone. No, you're not, because you're still a man. Like, none of this is about race. They just use it because so many people are not willing to stand up and protect white people. So when you attack white people, this is the reason why I don't like there's like some MRAs and anti-feminists, right? And they try this narrative, and they're just using the left's weapon against them, which doesn't work. It only ultimately validates their position when you do that. But they basically try to say, oh, well, feminism is an ideology that is basically just the fault of, or just the product of, wealthy white women. And I understand that if you look at the history, that's where it comes from. But I think it's a terrible mistake. It's a terrible mistake to play the left's game against them, because it validates the very root of their game from the get-go. Because you're basically saying it's okay to criticize whites because fuck them. And when you do that, all you're doing is you're taking away their sword and you're handing them a different sword. Because you're saying you can use the race argument if you want. And they will. And then they'll go back to the gender thing. Because men are at such a deficit when it comes to people's sympathy for them, or their desire to understand them, or our need to honor them for everything that they've done. It makes it so much easier for us to criticize them based on them being men. And then based on them being white. So I don't like to play that game. I actually despise playing that game. I despise it. I hate it with a burning passion, because people have value based on what they do, and it has nothing to do with their skin color or their gender, right? They either are useful, they are good for us, or they're bad for us. So this angry white male thing really upsets me, but what I think one of the reasons it does is that it's framed in such a way that there are many people who will give it a pass, some of them because it involves males, and some of them because it involves whites. And many of the people who will give it a pass because it involves whites are people who claim to be against SJWs while they're also carrying a flag for them. So that's my issue with it. If you want to see feminism run by angry black women, keep attacking the white women. How about we just attack the ideology? How about that?
So the thing I want to say about this is a little different. There is a behavior that is used by abusers whose primary tool is coercive control, using gaslighting and attacks on the person, verbal attacks on the person and attacks on the character. And this is the type of abuse that is used in dehumanizing demographics all the time, whether it's racism, sexism, against a group of people's religion, against sexuality, against an identity of any kind. This is how it's done, right? You, in addition to denigrating the individuals within the demographic based on stereotypes of the individuals, you create something like this Angry White Males Studies coursework where you portray any objection to that denigration and any discrimination they face as illegitimate and proof that they are bad people. So it would be very much like if you walked up to somebody in a public place and you told them, hey, I'm going to beat the fuck out of you, right? And then you just started wailing on them. But in between saying, I'm going to beat the fuck out of you, and you starting to wail on them, you say, and if you hit me back, it proves you're violent, and I was just preemptively defending myself, right? It's exactly the same thing. So this Angry White Male Studies class is the statement. If you defend yourself at all, that proves that you're the violent one, and I was just preemptively defending myself when I start wailing on you. Now stand still while I beat the fuck out of you. And that's basically all that is. That's the whole entire goal of having a class like this. Is just to characterize any defense that men have. And it's men in general, not specifically white men, even though they specify white men in the class. But any defense that men have as illegitimate and an attack. It is its own Darvo. It's a preemptive Darvo.
Yeah, watch any debate. So there was just a debate done on, I think it was Modern Day Debate, but Lauren Southern shared it on her YouTube channel. That's Lauren Southern Live or something like that. And they were debating whether or not there's a war on women. And of course, if you listen long enough, the feminist side of this will inevitably bring up hierarchy, because they're intersectionals, and patriarchy, which is basically still it's the same, right? They sort of rebranded it, but it's the same thing. And so the idea is that even though the conversation brought up trans women and, black men and brown men and, various victim groups that are not men, because that's basically the binary that they create. You have the people who victimize and the people who are victims, and the people who victimize also happen to look a lot like men, and because they are men. And so they always default to men are the problem, even when they're trying to trick you into thinking that they're saying only white men are the problem. And so, that's the reason. If you fall for that, if you say, yeah, I guess there are some problems with white guys, you lose. You lose. Because now, you have basically given them permission to generalize and demonize a section of the population because you didn't feel strongly enough about the fact that they were white to say, I don't think that's fair. And so instead, and a lot of times men who are not white will do this. They'll say, well, I'm black, so this excludes me. No, it doesn't. They are talking about you. Like, if all the white men just died tomorrow, they all just died, okay? What would feminists have to complain about next? Because that's all you have to look at it as. Like, they're just going to reframe, what's close to, Asian men. They're going to be the new patriarchs. Oh, brown men, Latino men, they have a machismo thing going on. They're toxically masculine. They're the new enemy. Oh, black men are always attacking black women for whatever reason, right? Young, straight black men are the white people of black people. So let's go after them. Race does not protect you. It is merely a trick. It is a tool. It's not even like It's basically an illusion that you're responding to. So look at the gender dynamics because they never lie. Look at how these people talk about men, regardless of what the fucking prefix is, whether they're saying white men, straight men, cis men. None of that matters. It's men. All right. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Okay, I want to move on to the next story. It's kind of similar to this one, so it kind of helps like reinforce this point that I'm making, which is essentially this class warfare that they're constructing with gender and race and sexual orientation and queerness versus normality. It's all like it all works the same. It all works the same way. Comes from the same place. It's just basically reoriented for its usefulness, right? It's like why I said in the UK they have to change the way that it's set up so that it has more meaning with the history of Britain as opposed to the United States, as opposed to Canada, because it's not based in anything real. It's all just manipulation. It's all gaslighting. So, all right. Anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I got a super chat from Albatross, and he says, for $5, thank you, Albatross, and says, I cannot be healthy to have this strong an obsession with white boys. All right, thank you, Albatross. I'm just saying we should protect the white boys. They deserve it just as much as boys of any other color. You know, that's all I'm saying. All right, so thank you for that. And now we're going to move on to the next story. Again, let me know your thoughts in the comments. So next we got this story from the College Fix. So New York University received a $40,000 federal grant, that's taxpayer money, that's mostly men's money, to study why children, quote, favor whiteness and maleness over other identities, end quote. The Department of Health and Human Services awarded the grant to NYU for a study titled Societal Assumptions Regarding Typical Personhood and Their Effects on Reasoning Development. According to the program description on usaspending.gov, quote, his project will uncover the developmental processes by which children acquire this belief that white males represent the default person, a pattern rooted in the ideologies of androcentrism, centering the experiences of men, and ethnocentrism, centering the experience of white people, prevalent in the United States.
It's
and
so
quote,
rich that they discovered the word androcentrism. Have never discovered the word gynocentrism.
Yeah. The researchers want to know the, quote, developmental trajectory by which children's default representations of people begin to favor whiteness and maleness over other identities, end quote. The description also states that they want to understand why children believe that, quote, white males, more so than black males, white females, or black females, best exemplify a person.
Yeah, it's for the same reason so many video game protagonists are white males. Why it's okay for anyone and everyone to freely wear the skin of a white man and step into their bodies and their lives in this standpoint theory assumption that they can effortlessly understand the lived experience of a white man. It's because nobody complains about the presentation of flawed white males, and no one ever complains about the portrayal of violence against white males. Nobody has to hark on about the eternal historical hardships faced by white males. Their hardships can simply be shown in real time, in the present, in an interactive medium. Everyone is allowed to display their hardships in any context, and they still don't count as hardships because there's no compartment in the average woke brain in which to file the concept of a white male hardship, because it doesn't exist. Children see through this because children feel like they're flawed, because they are, just like everyone is flawed. So they identify with characters who are flawed, and the only flawed characters they ever see are white men. The only truly three-dimensional characters they ever see are white men. Even superheroes, by the way, even literal superhumans In 21st century children who've grown up with all these superhero movies, they like Thor because he's a little bit naive. They like Peter Quill because he's kind of incompetent and insecure. They like Hulk because he's so short-tempered. They don't like Black Widow because she has no flaws to relate to. This is all an inevitable result of storytellers' reluctance to offend the narcissistic sensibilities of this ocean of Karens in which the world is drowning. Children think white males best exemplify a person because a person means the developmental arc of a human being, from weak to strong, from foolish to wise, from cowardly to brave. It will continue to be the case as long as you keep portraying every female character and every non-white character as someone who is and always has been superhumanly strong and wise and brave and perfect. Humans are not like that. Children understand this. If only adults could understand this.
Something you touched on, Mike, which is something that has an official name, has an official designation. Brian, I'm hearing myself through you.
Sorry.
It's the Galbraith paradox, if you've heard of that. I don't know if you were touching on that, if you know about that. But it's an initially talking about...
As in Guybrush Threepwood
yes,
from
exactly.
Monkey Island, yeah.
And it's saying most developers prefer to show their protagonist as a white male protagonist for those reasons that you stated. Because if they would switch things around and use a female protagonist, they'd either need to turn her into the perfect Mary Sue or get accused of sexism if she has any flaws, period, whatsoever. I believe people have been calling this now the Rey Skywalker effect. And I can't find the original, but it was essentially stating quite similar to what you were stating. How you can show a white male protagonist to be anything. They can be a lecherous drunk. They can be a sexist. They can be an utter buffoon. They can be a moron. They can be weak. They can be socially awkward. They can be cowardly. They can be kind of nerdy. And you don't sit there and go, well, what is this company trying to say about white men? It's never given a second thought.
You also have the fact that if a white boy is seen playing a character that is a black woman, he can be accused of engaging in cultural appropriation. But if a black girl is seen playing a character that's a white man, nobody will ever say that. But I have my doubts, like, in regard to what these people are trying to say with this research, versus what's actually happening with children, right? And I think these people are trying to portray children as viewing people who are not white men as less human because they're not the default. Like these people don't think that children can treat one person as a default and yet see other people as people. And I think if you asked a child to explain what it means when you say someone best exemplifies a person, the entire bit of research would break down. Well, I don't know. I just answered the question. What do you mean best exemplifies a person? And you know, maybe they may have been asked questions the way feminists asked about rape. Instead of saying, have you ever been raped? Do you know anybody that's ever been raped? Which only garners a 1 in 50 yes. They asked, have you ever had sex with a man when you didn't want to? Or have you ever had sex when you didn't want to because a man gave you alcohol? And that was interpreted as a yes, I have been raped answer. Even if the man gave alcohol and then she went off and had, her first bi-curious experience with some chick somewhere, that's a male and female rape story. And this kind of research always raises red flags with me because of that kind of questioning. Did they ask these children straightforward questions? Did the children understand what they were answering? And did they give them the opportunity to say, there is no one group that best exemplifies a person more than any other identity does? Because if they just gave them a set of identities and made them choose one, then they weren't necessarily getting the answer that best represents what the child thinks. Children will choose whatever they think that the reviewer wants them to choose. And if given a set of choices where what they're really thinking is not included, they may pick something random, or they may pick what they think might be the most popular or the most correct answer. And like, this study is going to probably be used to claim that society is racist, but it might actually only prove that the researchers are dishonest.
Just to add something else to it too that I think matters. There's some first of all, how are they conducting this study under the presumption that children view like the white male or the straight white male, which I'm sure they'd like to be able to say, as the default? Like, how do we know that that's what children believe? How do we know that? It seems like they're just claiming it, but there doesn't seem to be any like evidence. So maybe they're just presuming, because as researchers, they might just be presuming that we live in a culture that centralizes white men, therefore children are just going to do that.
It's a follow-up to another study.
And so, like, the other thing is the other study, because again, I'd have to see how that study was done, just like Hannah said, because like, maybe even the act of conducting the study engineered some of the answers, because depending on how young the children are, how much they want to please the person that's interviewing them or quizzing them, and how the person presents those questions, like, if I don't know, just as an exaggerated example, they might say, have you ever seen, and then they list off a bunch of movies with white dudes in it, and then, that have white male protagonists or books or whatever, and then they ask them, like, why do you think they're all white? And the kids might just say, well, I don't know, I guess that's the default. And it doesn't imply anything else. The other thing is, so what? This is one of the things that really bugs me. Like, we live in the United States. The United States, because this is a New York University study, so we got to talk about the U.S. In the United States, for most of its history that it was the United States, it was majority white. Because the colonists came here from England, and in England, it's majority white, or it was. So that is, unfortunately, like it or hate it, the basis of the culture of the United States for most of its history. So and not only that, but like, even people who lived in the United States, most of whom are white, they either created new culture in the form of literature and story and art and all these other things. And they also like carried with them a bunch of the literature and culture and art of England, because they were still in many ways English in the early part, right? So what is that going to do to a new country that is majority white? Well, basically their entire culture is going to be based in, a similar but separate history from where they came from. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if we were all living in India and I was reading the same article where they say, well, it looks like the Indian male is at the center of, what's considered normal. Like, that would be the response. We wouldn't be reading about white people because we're not in a white country. So, and again, this is another one of these things that I think it's set up in this way where you're supposed to say, well, if these children think that the default is a white dude, I don't know if I like that. We should also center on Black and Latino dudes, which is basically playing right into their hands, because they're basically creating, a reason for people to be aggrieved based on nothing. They're just saying you should be unhappy, and they obviously they want to foster that. That's why they're doing these studies, because again, this is just a waste of $40,000. Like, no one's gonna get anything out of this except more resentment, more division, more revolution, which is really what they want. They just want to create an endless revolution where people are constantly looking for things to point at and say that's oppressive, and it's not at all useful. And another thing too is that, like, let's say that they conducted this study, and just for the sake of argument, every child, when they asked, I guess, or when they were asked if what they consider to be the norm, and all of the children gave answers personal to themselves. So a black boy would say it's a black man, and a Latino boy would say it's a Latino man. For example, let's say that they did that. Let's say that those kids were as self-interested and narcissistically, prone to basically just putting themselves in the position of the norm. Which children, they are narcissistic enough to do that in many cases. It would still be majority white because the country's majority white. So why is that a problem? And I don't think there is a problem with any of that. So I think that it seems to me that they're looking for monsters where there are none. And even if they're 100% correct on this, and it was like literally children just saying, well, yeah, white men are the center, they're the default person. That probably has a lot more to do with our cultural history than racism. Because if you're reading the best books that ever came out of, Western countries, if you're watching the best stories and films, then yes, they are going to feature white people. Because they don't have the option of telling Mary Sue stories. They only can tell good ones. So they're the ones that will continue to persist, right? The ones that will continue to last. They're not going to date themselves. So I guess that's your fault, progressives. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
Now comes the fun part. If you are a man in the United States, you're a taxpayer, unless you are completely unemployed. But if you have a job, you're a taxpayer. You're not receiving benefits from the government. You're a net taxpayer. You're paying for this. This came out of your pocket. This study that's being used to disparage the idea of recognizing the maleness and whiteness might be a default on which people write their stories. That's being taken out of your pocket. They can't afford to have a council on men and boys, right? Or if they do have a council on men and boys, White House Council on Men and Boys, is going to be on what men and boys can do for women, because we have Democrats in the White House. But you got to pay for this.
I also do this because, like, anybody who wanted to conduct a study could try and raise charity donations to do it, right? But then they wouldn't ever get these ridiculously stupid studies done because no one really wants to see that. Not a lot of people. I mean, maybe you can get a George Soros type to give them money, but they'd rather just go right to the government and say, we want funding, taxpayer money, to do this ridiculous study, which, by the way, will harm our society in the long run. But we're not going to tell you this. Or maybe they do, and maybe the government says, yeah, that sounds good. A population that's at a population where everyone's at everyone else's throats over who's got privilege and who doesn't. Well, the state benefits from that. So why wouldn't they promote that? I mean, why not? And it's not their money. What do they care? They got no skin in the game. They're literally, we've just given them complete authority to do this crap, and they're just going to do it. So people need to realize that, and that like recognize that most of these really stupid, really evil studies that have nefarious ends that are not designed to help us understand the human condition better. They're not there to help us, solve, socialization problems. They're not there to like help us understand each other better, communicate better, right? They're not there for any of that. They're not there for what the Greeks wanted, where people were supposed to sit around and talk about ideas. They're not for any of that. They're for conditioning young people and molding their brains. And they're using...
But in very specific ways, because they're not doing a study on how sexual exploitation of boys in the juvie system by female inmates affects their prospects for recidivism versus getting out of the system altogether. They're not looking at stuff like that. They're looking at stuff like this.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff that's designed to create more antipathy and more division. So, and the state's paying for it with your money. So you should be paying attention. You should be speaking up about this often. If it's not too much trouble, it might be a good idea in the future. You could also do this with this show and other shows. If there's a particular story that you think people should know about, go to our Patreon. All of it's free to look at, so you don't have to be a paying subscriber. Go to our Patreon, look up the news stories that we've covered. We usually include all the links, or you could just Google search it based on the headline. I'm sure it'll come up. And share that article on your social media. I do it all the time. I'm constantly looking at articles and stories, that are essentially like what I think are particularly important points that people should know about, because a lot of the time people don't know about it. Well, if you can get them to read past the headline, but if it's a good headline, that might be enough to draw them in. But yeah, I know people who are politically, and I don't even like to say the word political, but I think that it's probably applicable. They're politically uninterested in things, but I share it with them anyway, because I think that they need to know. There are plenty of people who will say, I'm not interested in politics. And to that, all I can say is, I understand, but politics is interested in you. And so you need to know what's going on, because your desire to avoid everything, because maybe you don't want to upset people in your friends list or whatever, you need to know it's happening, because it's happening whether you are paying attention or not. So maybe it's a good idea to see it coming so that you're not blindsided because I avoid my politics, right? Because everything is political, and that's not my doing, and that's not Hannah's doing, and that's not the Honey Badger's doing. That's what feminists are doing. They're making it this way, and they control the conversation right now. They have the biggest megaphone. They run all the websites. They're in the White House. They're teaching our kids. They're everywhere. So there is no avoiding that, right? So you're going to have to face it. And I am saying this to women, because women in particular, while they have the most social influence, they are the most afraid to upset people in their friend group. And so no matter how nutty their friends are getting, no matter how crazy shit is getting, there is a lot of women that just sort of they keep their head down and they don't say anything because they don't want to anger someone on their friends list. And I say that you're not going to be able to run from that forever. You're going to have to become confrontational. Women have to step up. They have to.
People are shocked when a woman does. They don't know how to handle it. And I have actually experienced that, where people have asked me if I'm having...
Sorry guys, something happened with Discord again. I don't know why, but I think I'm still here. Yeah, go ahead, Hannah. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why.
I was gonna say, There have actually been people who have asked me if I'm having a mental health problem because I have not been afraid to upset people on my friends list over political disagreement. And I've actually had people in the community block me over political disagreement, where they would have just gotten into a knockdown, drag-out argument with a guy because I didn't bend over or acquiesce because, girl. And it's one of the things, and this has happened with both sexes, so it's not a masculine thing, it's not a misogyny thing. It's women behave this way normally, and I'm behaving abnormally by standing my ground on an idea. Women are going to have a hard fight to do this, and it's going to be an even harder fight to get the women who are reticent to do it anyway.
Yep.
But it needs to happen.
Yep. All right. So does anyone else have any final thoughts on that story that we just covered? Okay, so I guess before there's another weird Discord crash, I'm going to, let me just double check to make sure I didn't miss any super chats. And I think we're going to go ahead and head into the patron only show to look at this article. Let me show it really quick. Harley Quinn and why we all lose when superheroes can't eat pussy. I feel like this is going to be difficult to get through because it involves a feminist sexual fantasies about fictional characters. And I used to be someone who didn't mind joking about that or even, entertaining that just as like a, something funny to explore. But sometimes I think feminists, like, they get really obsessed. Like, it's worrisome. Like, it's like, ladies, not that I wish this on any man, but have you tried real men, like humans? like flesh and blood guys? Have you tried that? Like, what? Why are you so obsessed with what cartoon characters are doing? And it's not just like, like the usual like comic book pseudo fangirl that really doesn't like comics as they are, but they just like, the idea of like Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, clam slamming each other. That seems to be what they obsess over, or just other sexual things involving fictional characters. That there was a reason why you didn't see that in comics that boys like to read. You'll get romance, but you wouldn't get that. And I think the reason is because it's not what the narrative structure is intended for. Boys want to see action. They want to see people demonstrating their skill or their potency in a way that is to make the world a better place, a safer place, whatever. Not just to be like, oh, I wonder how long Batman can go for. Like, no, ladies, please. Somebody give them a bonk. I mean, like, get stop with the horny. It doesn't always apply. So anyway, we're going to be looking at that in the patron show. If you guys want to join us, go ahead and become a member. It's only $5 a month. You can give more if you wish. $5 though will get you into the Discord where you'll be able to watch the original or the full length patron shows. You'll also be able to watch some of Allison's content. She usually puts it out there to like request feedback before posting it. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Allison's posting a lot more, a lot of shorts lately. So there's plenty of that content out there, as well as getting to see Ragingings before they come out and other kinds of videos that are similar. So that's feedthebadger.com. And there's a link in the description to donate or join as a member. All right. So with all that said, if you guys like this video, please smash like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications so you know when our shows go live. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about today's show and everything we discussed on it. And most importantly, please share this video because sharing is caring. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.